Hola, ¿cómo estás, everybody? How are we all doing? If you're not doing well, dude, I sincerely am praying for you that you get better. Hopefully you keep me in your thoughts as well. But you know what? I made this video a couple months ago in 2018, and I did a late comparison review of it. Not even a comparison, but I never really owned this device until maybe even like that time that I made that video. So I figured, you know what? Instead of wasting your guys' time, let's go ahead and just re-review it for 2019 and looking forward. I don't want you guys looking at a somewhat outdated review. There's really not that many people talking about this specific tablet because we have so many more new ones out, so I figured I would do the sincere obligatory duty to go and review it in 2019. So we're going to be talking about the iPad mini 4, looking at the future of it, looking behind it, looking at, is it just overall worth it in 2019, and even just looking forward. So before we're looking forward, like I just said, let's go ahead and take a step back and talk about what's pretty much changed since last year, and even since that initial review. And I'll tell you, not much has changed. We're still on iOS 12. We've gotten a couple updates since then. We're currently on iOS 12.1.2, but really overall not much has changed. The hardware is still the same and everything like that, but I think I need to bring up a couple more points in this video that I forgot to bring up on that video, and I'll go ahead and talk about those kind of throughout. But I'm going to continue this video as if I didn't even make that video. So looking around the body, you can see it's the pretty familiar iPad mini design. You see that, in my opinion, it's pretty much like the 10.5-inch iPad, the iPad Pro version, but just a smaller version, and I really like this design. I like how the side bezels are a little bit smaller, and me personally, I really like this gold color, the white on the front and gold on the back. That's like one of my favorite color schemes ever, way more than like the silver on the back. So, but I really wish they made a black on the front and gold on the back. Like, why didn't they do that for the iPads? They did it now with the iPhone XS, but they should have done it back then. Now, this thing was released in 2015, which was around the same time that the iPhone 6s was released, and this actually has the same amount of RAM as the iPhone 6s. So just imagine like an iPad version of the iPhone 6s. That's like the biggest things I can contrast this specific tablet to. Now, one of the coolest things about this tablet is probably the screen. It's 7.9 inches. The resolution is kind of awkward. It's 1536 by 2048. It's around 324 pixels per inch, and in my opinion, I think the screen on this is definitely good and definitely great. I think the PPI is a little bit too small, especially when you're having that big of a tablet and that big of a screen to look at, but personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I really do think that the body and the screen of this thing is definitely a pro. Obviously, front camera on the front, back camera on the back. This thing still has a headphone jack and the lightning port on the bottom, so definitely huge pluses right there. Now, turning this thing on, what's interesting is that this thing started with iOS 9, which was the same version as the iPhone 6s, but like I said, you can get iOS 12 on it. But here's the thing, okay, if I had to follow the same type of software updates as the iPhone 6s is getting, I would assume that iOS 13 would probably be its last official version of iOS. So it's going to get all of iOS 12, obviously, and then all of iOS 13. And then if I had to put a number on it, I think it's going to stop on iOS 13. I don't think it's going to progress any further. And again, the main reason for that is because it was the release the same time as the iPhone 6s, but if the iPhone 6s gets an extra year support, then the iPad mini 4 will get an extra year support as well. So it kind of goes hand in hand with each other. But if I had to put a number on it, I would probably assume iOS 13 is where it's going to end, unfortunately. But looking inside of this is the kind of awkward thing, and I mentioned this in the other video, but I have to mention it again too. This thing has the Apple A8 chip, which is the same chip as the iPhone 6. The iPhone 6s had the Apple A9 chip, so I don't know why Apple did that. They should have just made it with the Apple A9 chip and just made it a little bit more future-proofed, because this is now in kind of an awkward situation. And I'll tell you right now, the iPad mini 4 wasn't slow. It was definitely fast and respectable because of that RAM, but I don't know why they put a year-old gen chip inside of this tablet. It makes no sense at all. But it has a dual-core 1.5 gig Typhoon processor, whatever that is, and like I said, 2 gigs of RAM. And I'll tell you that the performance is definitely good, definitely much better than an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 6 Plus. It's still not blazing fast. It wasn't like crazy. It wasn't like mind-blowing at all, but it can still definitely handle what you throw at it. I think the animations are sometimes slow and choppy. If you go and just like open an app and like try to get into multitasking by swiping up with the gestures, sometimes you can get into kind of weird and awkward performance there, some glitch frames and some other things. But really, if I had to use this as like a daily tablet, I really wouldn't care too much. There's some other things to complain about this thing for that, but overall, I think the performance is decent, at least solid. It's definitely on the better side of things. I know I say it all the time. If I had to put a number, I think the better side of things, I think that number is probably like a 7, okay? And anything above that is like, I guess, a plus. I would probably rate the performance of this maybe like a 7.2, give or take. Like I said, definitely on the better side of things, but not by much. I think the gaming is right there too. The gaming is pretty good. You know, casual games run fine. Heavier intensive games run perfectly. They don't run perfectly fine, don't get me wrong. If you run like Real Racing 3, the game will adapt itself to make sure it's adaptable to that game. So it'll lower the frame rates, lower the, like, I guess the intensity of the game, the graphics and everything, in order to make it run fine on the iPad mini 4. So what I'll tell you in terms of that, I think the tablet is a decent performing device. It's not the fastest thing. You will definitely notice it's sluggish at times. But again, you're rocking 2015 hardware on 2019 software. So you're not going to have like a complete compatible device, but it's not horrible by any means. Apple does a really good job at updating their devices constantly. So long story short, the performance on this thing is definitely decent. Now moving on to the camera, I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but it has an 8 megapixel sensor on the back. It's not dual cameras or anything like that. No portrait mode, no 4K or anything. You are able to shoot 1080p at 30 frames per second though. And surprisingly, you can shoot 720p videos at 120 frames per second. So that's a pretty big deal, kind of, especially on a tablet. But at this time, the iPhone 6s was able to shoot 4K videos. So, you know, it was already kind of a generation behind. It was like the hardware of the iPhone 6, but the RAM of the iPhone 6s. And I think the RAM was one of the more important things. So it's kind of weird that happened. It also has a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera. Again, no Face ID, no nothing. You have Touch ID. So that front camera is pretty basic. I guess it's okay, but it'll get the job done. But if you're relying on your iPad to be taking all the family photos and everything, you should probably go reevaluate your life and go use a phone or something like that. Your phone will have a better camera than this iPad, if I'm being honest. So that's pretty much it. I don't want to spend too much time talking about that. Now, one of the better things about the iPad, especially the mini series, was probably the battery life. But again, this one was kind of in the middle. So it had a 5,124 milliamp-hour battery, and I'll definitely say that standby time was very, very good in my opinion. If you plan on taking it to a trip with you, or you just want to throw it in your book bag, just need it whenever, then this thing will probably on standby last you at least like a couple weeks, as long as the screen doesn't turn on randomly anywhere. But I think if you're actually using it, which is what most people are probably doing, it'll last you probably like a couple of days, just depending on your usage. If you're completely like heavy gaming nonstop, then this thing will probably last you like 2 days. But if you are kind of seldom with your usage here and there and all that stuff, then you could probably easily get like a couple of days out of it. And I don't think the battery life overall is bad. I don't even think the battery size is bad, but I do think with what we have now, that this isn't necessarily like the best battery life you'll ever get from a tablet. I think the iPad mini 2 was pretty decent at battery life, but you do have to remember that because these devices are getting kind of old, the battery size has decreased a little bit just because of depreciation. It usually happens with almost every single battery. The more you use it, the more the battery life kind of deteriorates. So if you get it now, it's not going to be that full 5,124 milliamp hours. It's probably going to be like 4,000 something, maybe even 3,000 if it's really bad, if the person before you didn't use it that well. But I think that's pretty much where I'm going to leave that for the battery life. Now, like I said, some other notable things to note. This thing does have a Touch ID sensor on the front. Because of iOS 12, you can do those gestures now, so you can swipe up, swipe down from whatever, and I kind of like that. I like that setup a lot more, but honestly, I like the multitasking that was in iOS 11, where you can actually get to the control center at the same time. It's okay though, I mean, it's whatever. There's no IP certification or anything like that. There's no waterproofness, no water resistance. And one thing I kind of want to hit on, okay, now the pricing is one of those things I like talking about, especially for used devices. So last year they were around that $300 mark, okay, so not super expensive, but they weren't, I mean, this thing was, last year 3 years old, so you kind of expect it to be around that $300 range. But since then, even since like early last year, we've seen so many like iPads come out. We've seen the cheaper iPad come out last year, early on, like in February that came out, and then we saw 2 more new iPads come out just like a couple months ago. And since then, this price has actually dropped a little bit. It dropped to around that $200 mark. It's still not cheap. It's still pretty expensive if you ask me, but I think there's some better used options out there for the same price. So what I'll tell you is, is the iPad mini 4 still worth it in 2019? I think if you get a good price for it, maybe, but after factoring in the prices, I think there's a lot better iPads you can get. So I'm not saying the iPad mini 4 is bad. If you already have it right now, definitely keep it. I mean, don't even plan on selling it because it's a pretty decent tablet, I'm not gonna lie. But if you're looking for the best bang for your buck, I don't think the iPad mini 4 is probably that competitor. I mean, if you get it for less than $200, be my guest, but for $200, you can definitely go and get, I bought my used iPad Pro, the 2016 version, the 9.7 inch, for I think it was like $160, and I actually spent more on the iPad mini 4 that I bought now than the iPad Pro that I bought just like a year ago maybe. I would always recommend doing your research, but if I had to tell you, from my years and years of owning these Apple devices, and especially going and buying these used devices myself, I would probably recommend a used iPad Pro 2016 version than a used iPad mini 4 or even a new iPad mini 4 or whatever, you will definitely be getting better performance and just an overall better experience and a bigger tablet from that. But if you want the smaller tablet experience, obviously the iPad mini 4 would probably be your best choice. So eBay, Craigslist, all those other places would probably be your best bet to pick those things up. But what I always do is recommend getting certified refurbished. So not only is there usually a warranty with the devices that you order, but they're straight through Amazon, so you don't have to go make a separate account. You just order from your Amazon account and then it's all set and good to go. So what I'll do is I'll leave some links to the cheapest iPad mini 4s and iPad Pros that I can find on Amazon, and I'll link them straight in the description below so you guys don't have to go jumble around and everything. And actually, if you buy the devices through those links, some of that revenue comes back to the channel, and we actually can do more videos like this, do more comparisons, do more giveaways in the future and things like that. So if you want, that'll definitely be appreciated. And also, if you ever want to buy another tablet or phone or really anything at all, just go buy it through those links, and it helps the channel out a lot and it costs you no extra money. So we'd really appreciate that here. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. But I really appreciate if you guys could go and check it out. Also listen to my mixtape, it's like the third link down in the description. I would really appreciate if you guys could listen to that. Let me know what you think. Also leave some comments down on that video, that would mean so much. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys, and hopefully I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.